Trial attorneys Wendy Patrick and Adante Pointer are with me. Wonderful to have you guys here. Truly appreciate you joining me this evening. Let's begin with Dean. And the verdict is in. It's a manslaughter verdict. Adante, I'd love to get you to ring in your reaction to the verdict.
Well, I'm consistent with the young man in the sense that as a person, as an attorney that does a lot of these cases as it relates to law enforcement and people being harmed or losing their lives, oftentimes justice does not feel served at the end of these trials. And what I mean by that is the cop got off with a manslaughter charge. Many people in that community felt like it should have been a murder conviction. So it's less than what the community was looking for if you felt as if this officer was acting reckless and in fact was going to be fired if not for himself essentially resigning before he got disciplined by his own department, which many people feel is proof positive of the idea that he was in the wrong. So how do they not return a murder verdict? Well, you got to look at the jury instructions and also the makeup of the jury. These are lightning rod cases. This is the type of thing that divides America versus bring it together, unfortunately.
Yeah, fair enough. This jury coming back with this decision, they didn't believe someone. What do you think informed their decision to decide that this was in fact a crime, even though it wasn't the top charge, it was still a crime of manslaughter? Adante, this smacks to me of perhaps even some sort of compromise verdict. Your thoughts?
I certainly could see that the jury being back there coming to a compromise verdict. I don't think anyone, looking at the facts on balance, think the officer pulled up that night trying to kill someone. The issue here, if you will, if there's a compromise, is that his recklessness in the tactics, in the way in which he approached the situation. This is a young lady who was at home babysitting. She is alone with a young kid. All of a sudden, you hear someone, what appears to her to be prowling around the house in the middle of the night. She went and got armed, as anyone would do who's reasonable at home and is afraid of who someone is lurking outside when the officer failed to announce himself as a police officer. So, to me, the officer at that point lost his, if you will, his immunity or shield that he gains as a police officer, his privilege, and instead she was dealing with him as an intruder, as a burglar, as someone who was out to harm her. And unfortunately, she was the one that came out on the short end of the stick in that she lost her life. The officer, he's facing 20 years, but he's still alive to see his family for the holidays.
Welcome back. This is our Talk Back segment. Former Fort Worth police officer Aaron Dean testified in his own defense. And it seems the jury took some of his testimony to heart, but certainly not all of it. Just a short time ago, they found him guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter in the shooting death of Tatiana Jefferson. So for today's Talk Back segment, we asked you, what do you think of the verdict? Still with me, trial attorneys Wendy Patrick and Adante Pointer. All right, guys, our first comment comes from Glynis. Glynis says, I'm glad he's convicted, at least some justice for Tatiana. Hope he gets the maximum for manslaughter. All right, Adante, I'll begin with you. The maximum is 20 years. I don't think he's going to get 20 years. It's up to the jury. Again, that penalty phase begins tomorrow. There'll be victim impact statements. We'll learn more about the background of this guy, but I don't suspect he's going to get the maximum of 20. So it goes from 2 to 20 years. Where do you think this might land?
I could see it ending up somewhere in the middle, anywhere from 8 to 12 years. Because I think when you start talking about he's a police officer, unless he has a background that shows that he's, killed someone in the line of duty previously or has a bunch of complaints against him for violating policies, I think he's going to get the benefit of the doubt as a police officer, which he's cloaked in the idea that he's there to help people versus to take people's lives. I happen to know that he violated a bunch of policies and could have done things a lot better that would have avoided this senseless tragedy.
Yeah, fair enough. And that didn't come across as strongly. I agree with you. And it didn't come across as strongly as I thought it should have at the trial, but at least they did get this verdict. Our final comment comes from Lisa. Lisa says, does anyone know why he didn't render aid? And that's interesting because I think a big part of this was his actions after the shooting. And I think that's a part of it, Adante, the fact that he didn't render aid, he didn't warn about a gun, and he walked into the house as if he wasn't afraid of anything. I think all those played a big part in this verdict.
Absolutely, and I think that also undermines the idea that he was afraid and so he shot because he was in danger of his life, which is something that all police officers are taught to say, frankly, when they find themselves in a position like this. So the other part was, is he going to prison? The only thing that should beat him to prison is the headlights of the bus taking him there.
All right, fair enough. All right.